When ruthless outlaws target a federal judge's wife for revenge, they think they're grabbing a helpless victim. But some people hide deadly secrets behind perfect smiles and Sunday dresses. What happens when predators discover they've kidnapped the wrong woman will shock you to your core. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell. This helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Judge Michael Harrison stepped out of the federal courthouse in Phoenix, Arizona, his shoulders heavy with the weight of another difficult day. 3 weeks ago, he'd sentenced Marcus Viper Delacroix, leader of the Death's Head motorcycle gang, to life in prison without parole for drug trafficking and murder. The threats had started immediately, crude letters promising revenge against him and his family. His wife Elena had laughed off the security concerns. 20 years of marriage to a federal judge, and you think some motorcycle thugs scare me, she'd said, waving away his suggestion of a bodyguard. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, Michael. If only he'd known how right she was. At 6:47 p.m., Elena Harrison sat in her silver BMW outside Whole Foods, checking her shopping list one final time. She looked like any other upper-class suburban wife, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer jeans, and a soft cashmere sweater. Her manicured nails drummed against the steering wheel as she reviewed dinner plans in her head. She never noticed the black pickup truck that had been following her for the past 3 days. Target confirmed, growled Jake Razor Morrison into his radio, watching Elena through binoculars. Judge's pretty little wife, just like the photos.
Alone, no security, easy grab.
Remember, came Viper's voice through the static, calling from his maximum security cell, I want her scared but alive. Harrison needs to understand what happens when someone crosses the Death's Head. Razor checked his .38 revolver and nodded to his two partners, Tommy Wreck Adams and Carl Psycho Torres. Both men were career criminals with long histories of violence and zero respect for authority. Woman like that probably never faced anything worse than a broken nail, Wreck sneered, cracking his knuckles. This should be fun. Elena stepped out of her BMW, shouldering a stylish leather purse and walking toward the store entrance with the confident stride of someone who'd never known real danger. She moved with grace and poise, everything about her screaming, safe suburban target. But as she walked, none of the watching outlaws noticed the way she automatically scanned her surroundings. They didn't catch how her eyes briefly assessed potential threats and escape routes. They missed the slight tension in her shoulders that spoke of muscle memory and training most people never received. Now, Razor ordered. The 3 men moved in coordinated fashion, approaching Elena as she reached for a shopping cart. Wreck came from the left, Psycho from the right, while Razor moved directly behind her. Mrs. Harrison, Razor said quietly, pressing something hard against her lower back. Don't turn around, don't scream, just walk calmly to the black truck in the parking lot. Elena froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. For a moment, she looked exactly like what they expected, a terrified suburban housewife facing her worst nightmare. Please, she whispered, her voice shaking. I have money in my purse.
Take whatever you want. We don't want your money, Lady Psycho growled.
We want your husband to learn some respect. That's when Elena made her first calculation. 3 hostels, at least 1 armed civilian area with potential collateral damage. Standard kidnapping scenario, probably planned for days. Amateur execution, overconfident operators. Okay, she said quietly, her voice still trembling.
Please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you say.
As they began walking toward the truck, Elena's mind shifted into a mode she hadn't accessed in 8 years. The last time she'd needed these skills, she'd been Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps, with 43 confirmed kills as a sniper in Afghanistan. Now she was about to remind these outlaws why the Marines had a saying, every Marine is a rifleman. Even the ones who looked like suburban housewives. The black pickup truck pulled out of the Whole Foods parking lot with Elena in the back seat, sandwiched between Wreck and Psycho while Razor drove. To any observer, she looked like exactly what she was supposed to be, a terrified judge's wife being kidnapped by dangerous criminals.
Where are you taking me?
Elena asked, her voice small and frightened. Somewhere your fancy husband will never find you, Psycho sneered. At least, not until he learns to show proper respect to his betters. Elena nodded meekly, but her mind was working with military precision. She counted turns, estimated distances, and memorized landmarks. The truck was heading east toward the desert, away from populated areas where screams might be heard. "Please," she whispered, "I have children. They need their mother." It was a lie. She and Michael had never had children, but it was calculated to make her seem more vulnerable and sympathetic. "Should have thought of that before your husband sent our boss to rot in prison," Rec replied, enjoying her apparent terror. 30 minutes later, the truck pulled up to an abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere. The building was a relic from the 1950s, its windows boarded up and covered with gang graffiti. Perfect for what they had planned. "End of the line, princess," Razor announced. As they dragged her from the truck, Elena stumbled deliberately, dropping her purse and scattering its contents across the dusty ground. Lipstick, tissues, car keys, wallet, all the expected accessories of a suburban wife. None of them noticed that she palmed a small black object that looked like a garage door opener. "Clean this shit up," Razor ordered Rec, who began gathering Elena's belongings with obvious annoyance. They pushed her toward the abandoned building, Psycho keeping his gun trained on her back while Razor worked on the rusted padlock securing the front door. "You know what your husband did to our brother?" Psycho asked conversationally.
Life without parole.
"That means he dies in a concrete box, never seeing sunlight again."
I'm sorry, Elena whispered.
"Michael was just doing his job. Well, now we're doing ours." The padlock finally gave way, and they shoved Elena into the musty darkness of the abandoned gas station.
Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through cracks in the boarded windows.
Empty beer bottles and old newspapers littered the floor. "Home sweet home," Razor announced. "Hope you're comfortable, because you're going to be here a while." Elena looked around the space with what appeared to be growing panic. "How long? What are you going to do to me?" "That depends on how fast your husband learns to cooperate," Rex said, finally finishing with her purse. "We got some demands to make." They bound her hands with zip ties and secured her to a rusty chair in the center of the room. To them, she looked completely helpless, a soft, privileged woman facing her worst nightmare. But Elena was conducting a tactical assessment. 3 hostiles, 2 confirmed weapons, Psycho's pistol and a knife she'd spotted on Rex's belt, limited visibility, multiple entry/exit points. The building's construction was old brick and wood, solid but not impenetrable. Most importantly, she'd activated the small device from her purse when she'd dropped it. A GPS tracker with panic button functionality that she'd carried for years without ever needing to use it. Michael thought it was just a keychain accessory. In reality, it was military-grade emergency equipment that would bring very serious people to her location within the hour. "So here's how this works," Razor explained, pulling out a burner phone. "We're going to call your husband and give him a choice. He can reverse our boss's conviction, or we start sending him pieces of his pretty wife." Elena's eyes widened in apparent terror. "Please, you can't be serious."
Dead serious, lady.
"Your husband crossed the wrong people." As Razor dialed the number, Elena made her final calculations. She had maybe 60 minutes before her backup arrived. 3 armed criminals who thought they were dealing with a helpless victim. 8 years since her last combat deployment, but muscle memory didn't fade. The Marines had trained her to be a weapon disguised as a person. For 8 years, she'd been Elena Harrison, federal judge's wife and charity fundraiser. But Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez was about to remind everyone that some weapons never rust.
Judge Harrison,
Razor said into the phone.
"We got something that belongs to you." "Michael."
"Michael, is that you?" Elena's voice came through the phone speaker, pitched perfectly to sound terrified and desperate. From the other end, Judge Harrison's voice was tight with controlled fury.
"Elena, are you hurt? Where are you?"
"I don't know where I am," Elena sobbed convincingly. "These men, they grabbed me at the store. Please, Michael, just give them whatever they want." Razor smiled cruelly and took the phone back. "You hear that, Judge?
Your wife is real scared."
"But she don't have to stay that way if you're reasonable."
"What do you want?"
Harrison's voice was deadly quiet.
"Simple.
You're going to call the appeals court and tell them you made an error in Viper Delacroix's sentencing. Get his conviction overturned, and your pretty wife comes home safe."
"You know no can't do that."
"Judicial decisions don't work that way." Then you better figure out how to make it work, because if Viper ain't out of prison in 48 hours, your wife starts losing fingers. Elena whimpered on cue, selling the terror perfectly.
I need proof of life, Harrison demanded.
I need to know she's really alive and unharmed. Smart man. Hold on. Razor gestured to Psycho, who grabbed Elena's chin roughly and forced her to look at the phone's camera.
Michael, please help me, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so scared.
What the outlaws didn't see was the slight hand signal Elena made below the camera's view. 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. Combat hand signals her husband would recognize from her military stories. She was telling him she faced 3 hostiles, 2 confirmed weapons, 1 entry point secured. Harrison's sharp intake of breath told her he'd understood. 48 hours, Judge, Razor said, ending the call. Clock starts now. After securing the phone, the 3 men settled in to wait. Rec found some old beer in a corner and cracked one open. Psycho played with his knife, occasionally looking at Elena with predatory interest. You know, Psycho said conversationally, Judge don't cooperate, we might have to find other ways to motivate him. Pretty thing like you probably never been with a real man. Elena shrank back in apparent terror, but her mind was cataloging everything. Psycho was the immediate threat, unstable, violent, probably unreliable in a coordinated situation. Rec was the muscle, strong but slow, likely to react rather than think. Razor was the leader, most dangerous because he was calculating. Leave her alone, Razor ordered. Boss wants her scared, not damaged. Yet. Can't blame a man for looking, Psycho replied, but he backed off. Elena used the reprieve to test her restraints. The zip ties were tight but poorly positioned. Whoever had applied them didn't understand anatomy or leverage. With the right pressure applied at the right angle, she could probably snap them. More importantly, she'd been counting time. 53 minutes since activation. Her backup should be getting close. I need to use the bathroom, Elena said quietly. Tough shit, Rec replied without looking up from his beer. Please, I can't hold it much longer.
There is nowhere for me to run.
Razor considered this. The nearest town was 20 miles away, and Elena Harrison looked about as dangerous as a kindergarten teacher.
Fine. Psycho, take her outside.
Watch her close. Psycho grinned and hauled Elena to her feet, zip ties still binding her hands. He pushed her toward a back door that led to the rear of the building. Don't get any ideas, princess, he warned, pressing his gun against her spine. Scream, run, or try anything cute, and I'll put a bullet in your spine.
I understand, Elena whispered.
They stepped outside into the desert heat. The area behind the gas station was littered with rusted car parts and broken glass. Perfect cover for what Elena had in mind. Right there, Psycho pointed to a spot behind an old dumpster.
Make it quick.
Elena moved to the indicated position, using the moment to scan the horizon. No dust clouds yet, but that didn't mean anything. Military operators knew how to approach silently. As she pretended to attend to her needs, Elena positioned herself carefully. When Psycho got bored and looked away for just a moment, she made her move. 8 years of civilian life hadn't erased 12 years of Marine Corps training. Elena snapped the zip ties with a sharp twist that used bone leverage against plastic weakness, then spun and grabbed Psycho's gun hand before he could react.
What the foo? Psycho started to say.
Elena's elbow strike caught him in the solar plexus with surgical precision, driving all the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, she twisted his wrist until she heard bones crack and the gun fell to the ground. My name is Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps, she said quietly as Psycho collapsed, gasping for air. And you just made the last mistake of your life. The suburban housewife was gone. In her place stood a trained killer who'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan and earned a Silver Star for valor. The real fight was about to begin. Elena zip-tied Psycho's hands with his own restraints and gagged him with his bandana. The man who'd threatened to rape her now lay unconscious behind the dumpster, breathing but no longer a threat. She checked his weapon, a .38 revolver, 5 rounds remaining. Not her preferred rifle, but it would do. Elena also found his cell phone and a tactical knife with a 6-inch blade. Moving with the silent grace that had made her one of the Marines' most effective snipers, Elena approached the back of the gas station. Through a crack in the boarded window, she could see Razor and Rek inside, completely unaware that their partner had been neutralized.
Where de lis psycho?
Rek complained, crushing another empty beer can. Been out there 20 minutes. Probably getting a free show, Razor replied, checking his watch. Give him another 5, then go check. Elena smiled grimly. In 5 minutes, this would all be over. She circled to the front of the building, staying low and using the rusted cars as cover. Her tactical training kicked in automatically: assess angles of fire, identify cover positions, calculate fields of movement for hostiles. Through the front window, she could see both men clearly. Razor sat near the door, assault rifle across his lap. Rek was deeper in the room, handgun on the table beside his beer. Elena's military mind catalogued the tactical situation. 2 hostiles, both armed, confined space with limited exits. Standard room clearing scenario, complicated by need to maintain element of surprise. She activated Psycho's phone and called Razor's number. About time, Razor answered. You done playing with the judge's wife? Elena altered her voice to sound like Psycho's rough growl.
Got a problem out here.
Need you both outside. Now. What kind of problem? Cops.
Maybe 3 cars, coming fast from the east. Must we track something?
Elena watched through the window as both men tensed and grabbed their weapons.
Shit, Razor cursed. How far out?
Maybe 5 minutes. But there's something else. The woman, she ain't what she seems. What the hell does that mean? Just get out here. Both of you.
Trust me on this.
Elena ended the call and positioned herself behind an overturned car chassis. From here, she had clear sight lines to the building's entrance and perfect cover. The front door burst open and Razor emerged first, assault rifle ready, eyes scanning the horizon for police cars that didn't exist. Rek followed, handgun drawn, both men looking in the wrong direction.
Psycho.
Razor called.
Where are you?
Here, Elena said quietly. Both men spun toward her voice, but Elena was already moving. Her first shot took Razor in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying. Her second shot shattered Rek's wrist before he could bring his weapon to bear. Both men screamed and dropped to the ground, clutching their wounds. Elena emerged from cover, Psycho's .38 steady in her hands. To the 2 injured outlaws, she no longer looked anything like the terrified suburban housewife they'd kidnapped. Her stance was pure military, balanced, controlled, deadly.
What the fuck are you?
Razor gasped, blood seeping through his fingers. I'm someone you should never have taken, Elena replied calmly. But more importantly, I'm someone whose husband you threatened. In the distance, she could hear the sound of helicopters approaching. Her backup had finally arrived, but it no longer mattered. The situation was completely under her control. You're military, Rek wheezed, cradling his shattered wrist. 3 tours in Afghanistan. 43 confirmed kills as a sniper. Silver Star for taking out a Taliban commander at 1,200 yards. Elena's voice was matter-of-fact. I retired from active duty 8 years ago and tried to live a normal life. But normal doesn't mean helpless. The helicopters were getting closer, military birds, not police. Elena recognized the sound of Black Hawks. Those aren't local cops coming, she continued. Those are my former teammates from Marine Special Operations. See, the device I activated wasn't just a GPS tracker. It was an emergency beacon that goes directly to a very special unit that handles threats against federal judges and their families. Razor's face went pale as the implications sank in. You set us up. No, you set yourselves up the moment you decided to target a federal judge's family. Did you really think the government wouldn't have contingency plans for situations like this? The first Black Hawk touched down 50 yards away, and 6 heavily armed Marines in full combat gear emerged. Their leader, a gunnery sergeant Elena recognized from her old unit, approached with his weapon lowered but ready. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, he said with a slight smile.
Situation report.
3 hostiles neutralized, no civilian casualties, area secure, Elena replied in crisp military fashion. 1 restrained approximately 30 meters southeast behind the dumpster, 2 wounded here requiring medical attention. Outstanding work, Marine. Elena handed over Psycho's weapon and finally allowed herself to relax. The suburban housewife mask slipped back into place, but now Razor and Rek understood what had been hiding beneath it all along. You want to know what your real mistake was? Elena asked the two wounded outlaws as Marine medics began treating their injuries. You assumed that being a federal judge's wife meant I was soft. You never considered that maybe I married a judge because I believe in justice, and I have the skills to enforce it. As Marine medics treated the wounded outlaws, Elena's phone rang. Judge Harrison's name appeared on the caller ID. Michael, she answered. Elena, thank God. The Marines contacted me 20 minutes ago.
Are you hurt?
I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Elena looked at the three subdued kidnappers. But we need to talk about why these men targeted us specifically. What do you mean? This wasn't random, Michael. They knew too much about our routines, our security gaps. Someone fed them detailed intelligence. Gunnery Sergeant Martinez approached Elena. Ma'am, we found something in their vehicle you need to see. Elena followed him to the black pickup truck, where Marines were conducting a thorough search. On the front seat was a manila folder containing surveillance photos of Elena taken over several days, entering and leaving the courthouse, shopping at various stores, eating lunch at her favorite cafe. But it was what was underneath the photos that made Elena's blood run cold. Detailed floor plans of the Harrison house. Michael's daily schedule.
Security company information.
License plate numbers for both their vehicles. And most disturbing of all, a typed list of Elena's routine activities with precise times and locations. Someone's been watching us for weeks, Elena told Michael over the phone.
Professional level surveillance.
This wasn't some amateur revenge plot.
That is impossible.
Who would have access to that kind of information? Someone with law enforcement connections. Someone who knows how federal security works. Elena's mind was racing through possibilities. Michael, who else knew about the threats against our family? Just the usual people, court security, FBI liaisons, the U.S. Marshal Service. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach.
What about your clerk? Your bailiff?
Anyone with access to your calendar and case files. Elena, what are you suggesting? Before she could answer, Gunnery Sergeant Martinez returned with more evidence. Ma'am, we found communication equipment in the truck.
Professional grande staff, encrypted radios, satellite phones.
These guys were in contact with someone during the entire operation. Elena examined the equipment. Military specification gear, far beyond what street-level criminals could afford or operate. Sergeant Martinez, can your tech people trace these communications? Already working on it, ma'am. But there's something else. We found this in the glove compartment. He handed Elena a business card for Desert Rose Security Consulting with a local phone number and address. On the back, someone had handwritten, payment on completion, usual arrangement. Elena showed the card to Razor, who was now conscious and restrained on a stretcher. Who hired you? She demanded. Razor looked at the card and his face went white.
Lady, if I tell you that, I'm a dead man.
You're already a dead man. Life sentence for kidnapping a federal judge's wife, assuming you live long enough to see trial. Your only chance is cooperation. Elena crouched down beside the stretcher, her voice dropping to the quiet tone she'd used in Afghanistan when interrogating captured Taliban fighters. 3 tours in a war zone taught me a lot about extracting information from people who don't want to talk. I can make this easy, or I can make it very difficult.
Your choice.
Razor stared into Elena's eyes and saw something that made him decide cooperation was his best option. It was supposed to be simple, he whispered. Grab the judge's wife, make some demands, let her go when we got paid. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. Paid by who? We never met him face to face. Everything went through intermediaries. But the money was real, and the intelligence was perfect.
Too perfect.
Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't about overturning your boss's conviction, was it? Hell no.
Vipere segonna in prison no matter what.
This was about something else.
Something bigger. What something bigger?
Razor's voice dropped to barely audible. The man who hired us said the judge was getting too close to something. Something that could bring down some very important people. He needed Harrison distracted, maybe even removed from his current cases. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Michael, emergency at courthouse.
Federal marshals found explosive device in my chambers.
Building evacuated. The kidnapping hadn't been the real plan, it had been a distraction. While Elena was being held captive and Michael was focused on getting her back, someone had been planting bombs in the federal courthouse. Sergeant Martinez, Elena called urgently. We need to contact federal security immediately. This kidnapping was cover for something much bigger. As she spoke, Elena realized that her capture had been carefully calculated. Someone had known about her military background and assumed she would either be killed in the kidnapping attempt or would be too traumatized to think clearly afterward. They had seriously underestimated Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez. But more importantly, they had revealed the existence of a conspiracy that went far beyond motorcycle gang revenge. Someone with access to federal security information was trying to eliminate Judge Harrison, and they'd been willing to kill his wife to do it. The real enemy was still out there, and Elena was about to make them pay for their mistake. Elena grabbed the encrypted radio from the truck and studied its frequency settings. If the kidnappers had been in regular contact with their handler, the communication channel might still be active. Sergeant Martinez, I need your communications specialist over here immediately. Within minutes, a young Marine corporal with technical expertise was examining the radio equipment.
Ma'am, this is Ian Gear.
Encrypted, but I can crack the frequency if you give me 20 minutes. You have 10, Elena replied curtly. While the Marine worked, Elena called Michael again. The bomb at the courthouse. Was it in your chambers specifically?
Yes, hidden under my desk.
Sophisticated device, according to the bomb squad. If I'd been there when it went off. What cases are you working on that would make someone want you dead? Elena, I can't discuss active cases over the phone. Michael, someone just tried to kill both of us. Attorney-client privilege doesn't apply to assassination attempts. There was a long pause. There's a federal corruption case. High-level stuff involving defense contracts and political bribes. I'm supposed to rule on evidence admissibility next week. If certain evidence gets excluded, the whole case collapses. Elena felt the final pieces clicking into place. Who stands to lose the most if that evidence is admitted?
Elena, this goes all the way to Washington.
Defense contractors, senators, Pentagon officials. Hundreds of millions in illegal payments.
Ma'am, the communications specialist interrupted. I've got the frequency.
Channels still active, and someone's trying to contact the kidnappers. Elena took the radio. A voice was coming through, professional and cold. Unit 7, report status. Phase 2 initiation in 30 minutes.
Confirm target elimination.
Elena keyed the microphone, disguising her voice to sound like Razor. Target secured. Proceeding with Phase 2.
Negative. Unit 7.
Change of plans. Federal response was faster than anticipated.
Execute contingency protocol.
Eliminate all evidence, including the target. Elena's blood turned to ice. They were ordering her execution. Understood, she replied.
Unit 7 out.
Elena turned to Sergeant Martinez. They're implementing a backup plan. This whole operation was designed with multiple contingencies. What kind of contingencies? Before Elena could answer, her phone rang.
Unknown number.
Mrs. Harrison, a smooth male voice said when she answered. I believe you have something that belongs to me. And what would that be? 3 employees who failed to complete a simple assignment. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Elena put the phone on speaker so the Marines could hear.
I'm listening.
Your husband withdraws from the Morrison Defense Systems case, claims a family emergency, and requests reassignment to another judge. In exchange, this unpleasant business ends here. And if he refuses, then you'll discover that kidnapping was just the opening move. Phase 2 involves much more permanent solutions. Elena looked at the wounded outlaws, then at the Marines surrounding her. You made one critical mistake in your planning. What mistake would that be? You assumed that terrorizing a federal judge's family would be easy. You didn't bother to research who you were threatening. Elena's voice hardened to military steel.
My name is Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps.
I have 43 confirmed kills, 3 combat tours, and a very particular set of skills that I acquired over 12 years of military service. Mrs. Harrison, I think you're... I'm not finished, Elena cut him off. You sent amateurs to kidnap a Marine. You tried to bomb my husband's courthouse. You threatened federal officials in pursuit of defense contract corruption. Do you have any idea how many federal laws you've just broken? The silence on the other end told her that the voice was finally taking her seriously. Here's my counteroffer, Elena continued. You surrender to federal authorities within the next hour, or I hunt you down personally. And unlike these 3 amateurs you hired, I don't miss my targets.
You're bluffing.
Ask the Taliban fighters who thought the same thing.
Oh wait, you can't.
They're all dead. Elena ended the call and turned to Sergeant Martinez. I need a secure line to FBI headquarters. This operation is about to become a federal manhunt. As she waited for the connection, Elena reflected on how dramatically her day had changed. She'd started the morning as Elena Harrison, federal judge's wife and charity fundraiser. Now she was back to being Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, hunter of terrorists and defender of justice. Some people never really retired from war. They just waited for war to find them again. And Elena Rodriguez had just declared war on everyone who thought they could threaten her family. Within 2 hours, the abandoned gas station had become the command center for the largest federal manhunt in Arizona history. FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, and military intelligence specialists worked alongside Elena to trace the conspiracy that had targeted Judge Harrison. The communications equipment from the kidnapper's truck had yielded a treasure trove of intelligence. Encrypted messages revealed a network of corruption involving Morrison Defense Systems, 3 U.S. senators, and a Pentagon procurement officer who'd been taking bribes for 5 years. Elena, Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, approached with a laptop.
We traced the money trail.
The payment for your kidnapping came from a shell company owned by Morrison Defense. They were willing to commit murder to prevent your husband from admitting evidence of their bribes.
Elena studied the financial records.
$50,000 for the kidnapping, another $100,000 promised if Michael was eliminated. They really didn't want that evidence heard in court. There's more.
We identified the voice on the radio, James Morrison, chair of Morrison Defense Systems.
He's been coordinating the whole operation from his corporate headquarters in Scottsdale. Judge Harrison arrived by helicopter an hour later, flanked by federal marshals. When he saw Elena, still in her torn and dusty clothes but clearly in command of the entire operation, his expression mixed relief with amazement. 8 years, he said, embracing his wife. 8 years I've been married to you, and I never realized I was living with a one-woman Special Forces unit. You married Elena Harrison, suburban wife and charity fundraiser, Elena replied with a smile. But you attacked Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Marine sniper and very dangerous woman.
Big difference.
Agent Chen interrupted their reunion. Ma'am, we've got teams moving on Morrison Defense Headquarters now. But there's a problem.
James Morrison isn't there.
He disappeared an hour ago, right after your phone call.
Elena's expression hardened.
He's running. Most likely. Private jet filed a flight plan to a non-extradition country. He'll be in the air within the hour. Not if I can help it, Elena said grimly. Sergeant Martinez, do you still have access to military satellite surveillance? For a federal judge's wife who's also a decorated Marine? I can make some calls. 30 minutes later, Elena was studying satellite imagery on a military-grade laptop. James Morrison's convoy was visible heading toward a private airfield 40 miles north of Phoenix. 2 vehicles, probably armed security, heading for a Gulfstream jet that's already powered up for immediate departure, she reported.
Classic escape protocol.
We'll never get there in time, Agent Chen said. He'll be airborne before we can coordinate a ground response. Elena looked at the Black Hawk helicopter that had brought her rescue team. What about air response? Military aircraft can't engage civilian targets without specific authorization. That'll take hours to arrange. Elena smiled with cold determination. Then we don't engage as military. We engage as federal law enforcement conducting an arrest.
Elena, what are you thinking?
Michael asked nervously. I'm thinking that James Morrison made this personal when he ordered my execution. And I'm thinking that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez never left a mission incomplete. Elena turned to Gunnery Sergeant Martinez. I need to borrow your helicopter and one of your sharpshooters. Ma'am, I can't authorize. You're not authorizing a military strike. You're providing transport and support for a federal law enforcement operation. Agent Chen, do I have arrest authority as a cooperating witness in a federal investigation? Agent Chen considered this carefully. Technically, yes. You're deputized as a federal witness with citizens' arrest powers.
Then let's go catch a war criminal.
20 minutes later, Elena was strapped into the Black Hawk's gunner position with a military sniper rifle across her lap. It felt like coming home. As the helicopter raced across the Arizona desert, Elena checked her weapon and calculated wind speed and distance. 8 years since her last shot in combat, but muscle memory was returning fast. Target in sight, the pilot reported. 2 vehicles approaching the airfield. Jet is preparing for takeoff. Elena sighted through her scope and saw James Morrison running toward the aircraft. The man who'd ordered her death was 50 yards from escape. This is for threatening my family, Elena whispered, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, 400 yards in a moving helicopter, compensating for wind and aircraft vibration. The bullet shattered Morrison's kneecap and sent him sprawling on the tarmac, alive but no longer capable of running. Target down, Elena reported with satisfaction. Federal fugitive apprehended. As FBI agents swarmed the airfield, Elena finally allowed herself to relax. The suburban housewife had successfully completed her most important mission, protecting her family and serving justice. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was officially back. 6 months later, Elena Harrison sat in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., wearing her dress blue Marine uniform for the first time in 8 years. The Morrison Defense Systems corruption scandal had become the largest defense contractor investigation in U.S. history, with 17 arrests and hundreds of millions in recovered stolen funds. Mrs. Harrison, the committee chairman addressed her, can you explain to Congress how a suburban housewife single-handedly exposed and dismantled a multi-million-dollar corruption network? Elena smiled slightly. With respect, Congressman, I think you mean Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. And the answer is simple. Some people never really retire from service. They just wait for their country to need them again. The hearing room was packed with reporters, federal agents, and military personnel. Elena's story had become legendary. The judge's wife who'd turned the tables on her kidnappers and exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. James Morrison sat in federal prison awaiting trial on charges including conspiracy, bribery, attempted murder, and ordering the assassination of federal officials. His company had been dissolved, and his co-conspirators were facing decades in prison. The 3 men who kidnapped you, another congressman asked, what was their ultimate fate? Marcus Delacroix died in prison 2 weeks after his conviction. Apparently, even hardened criminals don't approve of people who target federal judges' families. The other 3 received plea deals in exchange for their testimony. They're serving reduced sentences and have provided invaluable intelligence about domestic terrorism networks. What Elena didn't mention was that she'd personally visited each of the kidnappers in federal custody. Not for revenge, but to understand how easily they'd been manipulated by forces they didn't understand.
You know what the real tragedy is?
Razor had told her during one visit. We thought we were just grabbing some rich guy's wife for easy money. We had no idea we were pawns in some corporate war. That's what happens when criminals get greedy, Elena had replied. Someone always ends up being used. After her congressional testimony, Elena walked out of the Capitol building to find her husband waiting with a smile and a surprise. Congratulations on your promotion, Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, Michael said, showing her an official Marine Corps letter. Elena stared at the document in shock.
Promotion.
I'm retired. Apparently, the Marine Corps has a different definition of retirement than you do. After what you accomplished, they're offering you a position with the Criminal Investigation Division. Full active duty status, focusing on cases involving threats against federal officials. Elena looked at the letter, then at her husband. Michael, this would mean deployments, dangerous assignments, time away from home. Elena, for 8 years I've watched you try to be someone you're not. You're not meant to organize charity luncheons and attend cocktail parties. You're meant to hunt bad guys and protect innocent people.
What about our life together?
Michael smiled. I fell in love with a Marine, not a housewife. It just took me a while to realize that. Besides, who else is going to keep federal judges safe from people stupid enough to threaten their families? 3 weeks later, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez reported to Marine Corps Base Quantico for her new assignment with the Federal Protection Detail. Her first case involved threats against a Supreme Court justice whose family was being stalked by domestic terrorists. Standing in her new office, looking at a map covered with active investigations, Elena reflected on the strange chain of events that had brought her back to active duty. A simple kidnapping had revealed her true nature and led to the most important mission of her career. Her phone buzzed with a text from one of her new teammates. "Ma'am, we have a situation. Militia group in Montana has been making threats against Federal Judge Williams. They don't know his wife is a former Army Ranger."
Sound familiar?
Elena smiled and grabbed her gear. On my way. As she headed out for her next mission, Elena thought about the kidnappers who'd made the mistake of underestimating a suburban housewife. They'd learned too late that some people's most dangerous secrets are hidden behind the most ordinary facades. In small towns across America, criminals were learning to be very careful about which families they threatened. Because they never knew when that soccer mom might turn out to be a retired Special Forces operator, or when that quiet accountant might be a former CIA operative. Elena Rodriguez had become the poster child for a simple truth. In America, heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like your next-door neighbor. And sometimes, that's exactly what makes them so dangerous. The suburban housewife was gone forever. In her place stood a federal agent whose job was protecting the people who protected justice itself. And anyone stupid enough to threaten a federal judge's family was about to discover why that was a very bad career choice. This incredible story proves that true strength isn't always visible on the surface, and that the most dangerous people are often the ones you'd never suspect. Elena Harrison's transformation from kidnapped victim to federal protector shows us that some skills never fade. They just wait for the right moment to emerge. If this story inspired you, remember, we never know what battles the people around us have fought or what strength they carry inside. The quiet neighbor, the friendly teacher, the helpful store clerk, any of them might be a hero waiting for their moment to shine. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share this with someone who believes that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Help us spread stories of hidden strength, unexpected courage, and the unbreakable spirit of those who serve and protect.